off.
Finally.
And
Finally. I mean, you worked
then-
so hard and around the clock, and I was wondering when you were going to go and leave.
yes. So finally, I managed.
That's how come you look all good. Oh my God. I mean, the bald head is shining even brighter.
Is it shining more? Huh?
Yay, shine bright like a diamond. Shine bright. Oh my God.
it was good. I had a
nice.
lot of fun just to be away from everything. And,
Yeah.
like, really mentally to be away.
Yeah.
Because the team was holding the phone. Oh, doctor, go.
Yeah.
We'll be fine. I managed to put the phone away for
a
quite
while.
some time, for a while, and then
That's
have some
good.
fun. But yeah, after 5 or 6 days or so, I was missing it. So,
Yeah.
it's good to be back.
Well, whilst you were away, we were also suffering. So now that you are back there, Ejumano, will be yes, sir.
No worries. So long as the one logo line is there,
It's covered. I hear you. One of our good friends wanted your help, and we thought that today would set that conversation up. So, because I know a lot of people also need education on diabetes.
Right.
Now, it says I have a family medical situation that has really spooked me over the past 3 months. I'm 32, male, and I've lived in Accra all my life. I come from a large family and have close ties with my extended family.
Right.
A few weeks ago, I was informed an aunt had her right leg amputated just below the knee at a major hospital in Accra. I was told the reason was she had a festering sore and poor blood flow due to long-standing poorly controlled diabetes.
Wow.
Just last week, another relative was sent to an eye clinic in Accra due to a progressively deteriorating eyesight. The doctor informed him that this was a result of diabetes as well. Kwame, all I know is that diabetes will cause one to urinate a lot at night. So where from all this? Can diabetes be shared among family members? Am I at risk? Should I see a doctor now? I'm very worried. Can the drive doctor help? And I said yes. So over to you, Doc. I know you can help.
Right. Good afternoon to all our listeners, and it's good to be here another Wednesday to have another conversation, great conversation with all of you. Kwame, diabetes is one of those diseases, and I'm sure what is wrong with both relatives, members of the family, is diabetes because of the amputation, the leg amputation, and then also because of the blindness. So today I want to talk about diabetes. We probably will not exhaust the conversation today, and we will continue the conversation next week. There will be a part 2 next week because when it comes to diabetes, then there's a lot to talk about.
Okay.
The first point I want to make, Kwame, is that the full name is diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus. There is another entity called diabetes insipidus. Diabetes insipidus.
Okay.
So we need to, most of the time we'd say diabetes for short when we are referring to the mellitus. So DM and then DI. The DM is far common than the DI, and which is what most of us refer to when we say diabetes. But I just want everybody to know that diabetes, its full term is diabetes mellitus. It is a disease that's been around for a long time. Kwame, if I tell you that we started talking about diabetes as physicians from the 2nd century AD, you probably won't believe me, but that is what the history of diabetes. It goes as far back as the 2nd century AD. There's a reason why the name mellitus is given to it, or was given to it at a point in time. It just means honey sweet.
Honey sweet.
Yes.
Ah.
So Kwame, we found out, or physicians found out many years ago, that the urine of those suffering from this particular disease tasted sweet, like honey.
I'm just wondering how they found out.
Oh, well, they were tasting the urine.
Like, whose job was it to find out?
Kwabi, why do you think that they call it a noble profession? Ours is nobility. You are tasting comfort juice. So you have to respect her. The respect was earned. It wasn't just granted to her. Today doctors have swag and no, first you taste urine. You son woman, now we taste your hair. Sweet.
What?
Yes.
Wait, hold up. So that's the diabetes mellitus, right?
Yes.
You said the other one is diabetes insipidus.
Insipid.
Meaning tasteless or something.
You know, bland.
Ah. Okay, I get it now.
Exactly. So you know that's the difference, the key difference.
Yeah.
And at the time, because science and technology wasn't that developed, this was about some 500 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean that's all that they could use to distinguish the disease or to identify the disease. Later on, certain advances were made, and then we found out that this was as a result of a problem happening in the pancreas. So, Kwame, what is diabetes mellitus? Diabetes mellitus is actually a group of diseases, not one single entity. We're talking about a group of diseases which have a common characteristic, high blood glucose. High blood glucose. That is a common characteristic among this group of what we call metabolic disorders. So it's not just one particular thing, but it's just that the common theme running through all of these diseases is the high blood glucose. And Kwame, we're going to be saying glucose for the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks to the point where people will stop saying sugar. Because it is glucose and not sugar.
Okay.
Sugar, if we want to talk strict chemistry, is sucrose. It has a distinct chemical structure.
Okay.
But the problem in diabetes mellitus is the way your body handles glucose. Both are carbohydrates. And biology 101, we know that carbohydrates come in different forms. You have simple carbohydrates and then you have complex carbohydrates. The simplest form of carbohydrates are called the monosaccharides. And an example of a monosaccharide, a very simple, is glucose. So starch will form complex carbohydrates. So you've got fructose and you've also got sucrose and so on and so forth. So they are not chemically the same. They're similar, but there are differences. So we shouldn't say sugar.
Okay.
But we've been saying blood sugar for a long time. Even healthcare professionals keep saying sugar.
Okay.
But the real problem is glucose. And I need to...
Diabetes, my friend is Anna.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the Chi translation of diabetes mellitus. Because of the sweet tasting nature. So at the time, whatever tasted sweet was like sugar cane.
Yeah.
So we make that connection between something that tastes sweet and sugar. But the real problem is glucose. It is important we make this distinction because when we begin to talk about how we are managing it and when we say avoid certain things, you begin to understand that it is not only the sugar that you pour in the cocoa or in the tea that you're supposed to avoid, but then there are some, your glucose load is what you have to take cognizance of. So the problem in diabetes actually is not the glucose. The problem is how you are handling glucose, either in the fasting state or in the fed state. So Kwame, glucose is the energy currency of the body. It is a very important chemical substance that your body needs. It's a very important food substance. Without glucose, you and I can't live. So that is the energy currency. They say tomorrow they will do some announcement. But when I go, I will come again. Today might be the last time you see me in the studio. Because the energy currency, I need to come here.
I swear.
Tomorrow they say they are going to do some announcement. So the body's energy currency is glucose. So having glucose in your body is not a problem. We need it. The way we handle glucose is what has become problematic in a setting of diabetes mellitus.
Okay.
Glucose control is regulated by another substance called insulin. Insulin. Insulin is produced by the cells of an organ called the pancreas. So, Kwame, the pancreas sits in the upper part of your abdomen. When we open up, the liver will be on the right upper side, the spleen will be on the right, at the left upper side, and then somewhere centrally you'd probably find the pancreas, and that is responsible for some of the cells in there are responsible for producing insulin. Insulin regulates the amount of blood glucose that we all have at any particular time. And in diabetes, the problem is the insulin. Either no production, underproduction, or disordered production. So we'll classify diabetes into 4 main groups. We've got what we call the type 1 diabetes, where the individuals in this category produce no insulin whatsoever from the pancreas. And that is why we say that type 1 is usually found in children right from birth. So there was a problem such that your pancreatic cells that are responsible for producing the insulin, they didn't get that memo. When you were in there, they didn't get that memo that they are supposed to produce insulin. So there are some genetic problems that happened. The code that was supposed to be sent, the genetic code that gets them to produce their insulin, something happened and you are not able to produce any insulin at all. The type 1 used to be called insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. Insulin dependent because there is no insulin whatsoever. So right from the get-go, we have to put you on insulin. Kwame, before 1921, when 2 stalwarts of medicine were able to isolate insulin for the first time, 1920, they were called Banton and Best. One was a doctor, the other one was a medical student. They worked together, and in 1921, they isolated insulin. Prior to 1921, if you get a type 1 insulin-dependent diabetes, you just die. You die a very horrible death because we can't give you insulin. So that's the type 1, no production. We have a type 2 where you used to have good production. Now there's something wrong with the factory and you are underproducing. So instead of producing 100%, you are now, say, maybe down to 60% or 50%. So you're still producing insulin, but it doesn't meet the needs of the body. So that tends to develop later on in life. So we call that the type 2, or they will say adult onset diabetes mellitus, or the non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. You'll find all those terminologies in the literature, or if you do your research, but they mean type 2. Now the accepted nomenclature is type 2 diabetes mellitus. So this is underproduction. Then the problem may also be that you are producing, but the insulin you are producing is ineffective. Can't do the work properly as it's supposed to. So this is also something that happens in the type 2. Because it used to work, now it is not working. So it's not a question of the quantity, but then the nature of the insulin molecule that you are producing is such that it cannot do the work that it's supposed to do. When it comes to chemistry, it's like a lock and key. You must have a right key for the right lock. So Kwame, if you don't pay your rent, what does the landlord do?
Changes the lock.
He changes the locks. You have your key, but they realize that the key doesn't fit. So we've got that type of a model that chemicals work. There's a receptor that must fit the molecule to be able to exert an effect. Then we've got also the pregnancy-induced diabetes, or what we call the gestational diabetes. This is diabetes that occurs only during pregnancy. So I've talked about the type 1, we've talked about type 2, then we've got what we call the gestational diabetes. So some women get pregnant, and then during the pregnancy, we realize that they have become diabetic. Their blood glucose level is higher than what we expect. After they give birth, 6 weeks after they have given birth, everything turns to normal. That's what we will call gestational diabetes. They were not diabetic before the pregnancy. 6 weeks after the pregnancy, they are fine. Everything comes back to normal. Then we will call that gestational diabetes. A very important point about those with gestational diabetes is that they tend to develop diabetes later on in life if you follow them up. The type 2 type of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, later on in life. But that's a separate thing we'll talk about later. So gestational diabetes is also another category of diabetes. Then the fourth category is very broad. It includes a lot of things. So we'll call it all other types of diabetes. Sometimes we'll put people on medication, or people abuse certain drugs and then they develop diabetes. Steroids. Steroids. So men use steroids, abuse steroids, and women also abuse steroids. So yesterday there was a very illuminating article in the Daily Graphic on skin bleaching. So some of the bleaching agents that are used for lightening the skin are steroid-based agents.
Okay.
So the bleaching of the skin, a lot of them end up developing diabetes, because even when you apply things over your skin, you develop, it gets into your body. So steroids. Doctors can sometimes also prescribe steroids for individuals. For example, asthmatics. If you have a patient who suffers asthma, then we may sometimes put them on steroids, and then they may develop diabetes as a result. So steroids are very, very good drugs. It's just like fire. They've got a lot of side effects, but they've got beneficial uses, and therefore strictly prescription only medication that your doctor has to put you on it and has to look out for side effects. So steroid-induced high blood glucose is an example of that fourth category where we say other forms of diabetes. Somebody develops, for example, cancer of the pancreas. And I think it's well-known fact that Steve Jobs suffered from that. And that destroys the entire pancreas. And that will lead you to developing diabetes. Some people can also develop infections, bacterial infections or viral infections of the pancreas, and that will also lead to them developing diabetes.
Okay.
So there are all these different causes that can do that. So Kwame, these are the four main types of diabetes that we know of.
It seems to me in our gentleman's case, there's a bit of family history and diabetes present in the family.
Right.
So I'll assume that it's genetically passed on or some of the sort. People are genetically at risk.
Right.
But I'm sure there are other causes.
Right. So Kwame, the first point, when we begin to talk about diabetes in terms of the causation, we sometimes still don't know the exact cause. These are, especially for the type 1 and type 2, why is it that the pancreas is not producing any at all? We think it's a genetic problem that's gone, something that's gone wrong genetically, so that they didn't get a code. But why is it that something went wrong genetically? We still may not know the answer. So that's why we say there's a genetic influence in terms of the causation. And so family history is very, very important. It's one of the reasons why I keep making this point. We should all know about our medical family history. Aside that, then we'll talk about risk factors for developing diabetes. So the nature part is the genetics, and then the nurture part is the environmental factors that we believe to be at play. So obesity increases your risk, for example, of developing the type 2 type of diabetes. Obesity. Physical inactivity has also been mentioned as a risk factor for developing diabetes. So, if you look at these two things that I have mentioned, the obesity and then the physical inactivity, is very, very prevalent. We used to think that diabetes was a Western nation problem. But I look around and there are quite a number of people who carry more weight than they're supposed to. And they are either overweight or they're obese. So typically we call them the Makola type women in our part of the world. A lot of young men, unfortunately, with protruding abdomen that I see climbing the hill on Saturdays at Ayimensa and all of that. So these are very, very important risk factors. So the family history, very, very important. If you ever had also gestational diabetes, then you are also at an increased risk of developing diabetes. And that introduces me to the question of screening for diabetes. So before we talk about screening, I'll do that next week because it's quite extensive. I want to talk about presentation. How do we know that somebody has diabetes? If you do have diabetes, there were 3 classical symptoms: polyuria, polydipsia, and then polyphagia. The 3 P's. Poly means many.
Okay.
So polyuria, yeah, polytanko. Polyuria meaning you are urinating large volumes.
Okay.
Urine. So polyuria. Polydipsia means you're drinking a lot of water. Thirst. And then polyphagia meaning you're eating a lot. So Kwame, we all know how much we can eat. So I can eat 2 balls and then that is it for me. All of a sudden you realize that you are eating 3 balls and you still want more. Or you finish eating, maybe it's 10 o'clock and you feel hungry again. So most people come to us, and especially the women, because when they become ladies, then they are very careful about how much they eat. Women feel very embarrassed about being told that they eat a lot. I don't know why. It's a ladies' thing. But we the guys, Charlie, we want to eat. So they tend to notice that. But if you're a guy too and you realize that no, you're eating more than what you are used to, it may be a sign. You're urinating too frequently. And unfortunately, men tend to urinate outside in this country. I think we should stop. But it is one of those things where people will come and tell me that, doctor, where I urinate most of the time around my house, this is when I go there, I see black ants. Yes, because the urine is sweet. So they keep urinating there and they keep going back to that same place, and then they find out that there are black ants around there. Oh, Kwame, it's your own urine. Every now and then you should taste it.
Huh?
That's why I would do so.
No.
It's 90% water. So polyuria, polydipsia, and then polyphagia. Most times there's associated weight loss. So you realize that you are eating a lot, yet you are losing weight. Who did it now for? So that is classically diabetes.
Okay.
And I would want us to pause here.
Yeah.
And then next week, I will look at the diagnosis. This is what you would see and come to hospital and come to talk to us. But if you come to the hospital, what are the tools available to the doctor? How would we go about making a firm diagnosis of diabetes mellitus?
I mean, this has been very good education. I got to be honest with you. I think I understand the concept a lot better now.
Right.
I know it's mellitus and insipidus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the type 1, type 2,
gestational,
and all other types.
Other types.
Yeah.
And then the glucose.
And the glucose.
The glucose, not sugar.
Yeah.
Sucrose.
Sucrose.
Not sugar.
Fructose.
Yeah, glucose is available in everything.
Yeah.
Even green leafy vegetables.
Yeah.
Fruits. Rice. Yam, cocoa yam, plantain.
Wow.
It's in everything, glucose. And that is why I want us to start saying blood glucose levels,
yeah,
urine glucose, and stop saying sugar.
Polyuria,
polyphagia, and polydipsia.
And polytank.
But you saw polytank,
Thank you, Dr. Safo. We will continue next week. I'm looking forward to the next episode, honestly.
You're welcome.
I totally can't wait. For those who want to get in touch,